𝗳𝗿𝗀𝘀𝗀𝗵𝘁𝘀. In this video, I would like to share a kind of summary, I can call it, for the last AAOIFI Shari'ah Boards Conference that was held last month in Bahrain. And I will give a very brief summary of the sessions that were conducted during the conference. There were around 5 panel sessions we had, and out of these 5 panel sessions, at least 3 of these, I think I can say around 4 of these were more based on research, where the researchers presented their papers, and there were also panelists who commented on the papers, and the discussions evolved. The first session was on the importance of workforce development in the entire Islamic finance industry. It was not based on some research papers, but on the industry experiences, that in the overall industry, in the global Islamic finance industry, we have this common challenge. We have shortage of Islamic finance talents. Now, be it in the Sharia, let's talk about Sharia research, Sharia review, Sharia auditor, or any other domain of the entire Islamic finance industry, we have real shortage of talents. So the session basically emphasized that we need more and more talents who are not only skilled but also certified from the institutions like AAOIFI. As we know, AAOIFI has several industry leading certification programs. So the session emphasized on making these certification programs more accessible to the industry. Then we had another session. That session was about compensation when the promises are breached. Wa'ad mulzim, as we know, a binding promise or unilateral promise, is a well-known instrument that is being used in a lot of products in the Islamic finance industry. Think about Murabaha, goods Murabaha 𝗬𝗿𝗀𝗵𝘁𝘀𝗶cie his𝘀, in which it starts with a commitment, with a promise from the client, from the consumer who needs the funds, that he will purchase if the bank makes a purchase from the supplier. And that promise is a binding promise, which if infringed, which if not fulfilled, compensation may be charged by the financial institution or the promisee. The question is, can we really charge a compensation in case of a wa'ad or promise? Does it need to be binding or non-binding? Is there really something called binding promise? And if we charge a compensation, how do we calculate actual loss? As we know, in AAOIFI standards, it was mentioned that the promisee can charge actual loss, if any, if there was an advance 𝗳𝗿𝘀𝘀𝗶cie paid by the promiser. So if you listen to these things, I believe you might have already in your head that why is this a topic in this Shari'ah Boards Conference? Because these things have been quite settled in the industry. We have AAOIFI Shari'ah standard on wa'ad, on promise, we have a resolution from the International Islamic Fiqh Academy, and so on and so forth. The answer is, even though we have this standard, even though we have the resolutions from the Shari'ah boards, but there are situations which might not have been covered in the standards, in the resolutions, and requires real fiqh-based research. At the same time, maybe there are resolutions on few areas, but maybe the recent developments were not considered at that moment. So it's always good and important for Sharia research and Sharia scholars to go back and check and validate if the things that were discussed and decided earlier are still well grounded based on the current or modern development and circumstances. And that was the rationale behind this session. The next session was about governing law and Islamic financial institutions or Islamic financial products. As you know, this is one of the most challenging topics around the globe when it comes to Islamic finance products or structures or ventures. What we mean by governing law is, what is the law that dictates an Islamic finance contract? For example, let's say we decide in a country called ABC, and the ABC country has its own law regarding financial transactions, loans, commercial contracts, etc. Now, in that ABC country, if we are signing an Islamic finance contract, will it be governed, or will it be interpreted, or will it be regulated by a law which is conflicting with AAOIFI Shari'ah standards, for example, or Sharia as a whole, or how? And that is a real question that practitioners around the globe face every day, right? So in this session, basically, they acknowledge the challenges we have, and at the same time, they discussed some potential alternatives, like we can still make AAOIFI Shari'ah standards as something that can be used for the interpretations. For example, we can put an arbitration clause where the arbitrator would be bounded to do the arbitration in accordance with AAOIFI Shari'ah standards, etc., etc. So they tried to discuss few things, and on the broad level, there were some suggestions so that there is a broader council from different jurisdictions comprising of lawyers, judges, etc., and AAOIFI Shari'ah standards experts, Sharia scholars, etc., so that we can have a broader collaboration and have a good solution for this challenge. The next session was on combination of contracts. Again, as you know, there is a separate Sharia standard issued by AAOIFI known as 𝗳𝗿𝘀𝗀𝗵𝘁𝘀𝗶 or combination of contracts. Now, why is this discussion popping up again in the Sharia Boards Conference? If we look at the research papers, we will find that there are a number of situations or scenarios which might not have been considered in the previous standards issuance. So it demands updated research so that we can always satisfied that whatever we are doing is 100% Sharia compliant, well grounded on the research based on the usul fiqh, qawaid fiqhiyya, or the Islamic legal maxims and jurisprudence rules. And it was a good discussion by the researchers, by the commentators as well. And if we look at the intended outcome, I had an opportunity to speak with the researchers on the sidelines, and they mentioned there might be a need to relook at the standards and resolutions issued before so that we can correct it based on the latest findings of the research. And last but not least, there was another session, and that was the last session on re-takaful or reinsurance. One of the major challenges in the entire Islamic finance industry is to find proper re-takaful operators. Alhamdulillah, today we have a lot of takaful operators in many Muslim countries as well as a lot of non-Muslim countries as well. But honestly, there is a huge gap or shortage of re-takaful operators. Re-takaful operators are basically another type of or another class of takaful operators, but they provide the takaful for the takaful operators. So you can say it's like a takaful for the takaful operators or insurance for the insurance providers. Now, in the conventional space, there are a lot of reinsurance providers, but in the Islamic finance space, we have the shortage. And the discussions, were around the research, etc., were around how and we can solve this problem and the challenge. As you know, in the global Islamic finance industry, there is a practice, even though there is no such resolution, but I believe, but the kind of consensus among the scholars in terms of the practice is that if we don't find a real reinsurance, the scholars would provide a temporary approval for the takaful operator to engage the reinsurance providers. But that should be temporary. There should be consistent trial that we are always trying to get the re-takaful operators. We negotiate with them, we get engaged with them, etc., etc. So I think all these things were well discussed and elaborated in this particular session. And as you know, there is AAOIFI Shari'ah standard as well on this particular re-takaful, takaful and re-takaful. But again, it was brought into discussion because it's a real industry challenge, particularly when it comes to Sharia assets. Now, all these 5 sessions were well grounded on research, and we thank and make dua for all the researchers as well as the commentators who made their valuable comments, as well as the questioners who made the engaging questions to make these discussions more fruitful and beneficial to all the audience. And we hope this culture of research, this culture of always going back and ensuring that all the decisions and fatwas we provide are well grounded in Sharia, this will always remain. And this is the dynamic aspect of Sharia that will keep our modern practices as well as transactions Sharia based and Sharia compliant, and also in compliance with the objectives of Sharia. We thank AAOIFI for organizing this Shari'ah Boards Conference, as well as the Central Bank of Bahrain, who was the main sponsor, as well as all the audience and the attendees that we have seen as the speakers and researchers. Thank you so much, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it and grant barakah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.